This is the incident of 10th April 1912. RMS Titanic, world's largest and most luxurious ship in its time, it set out on its first voyage. It was traveling from Southampton, England to New York. It was being commanded by 62 years old senior captain Edward John Smith. It was not only the world's largest ship, around 269 meters in length and more than 53 meters high. The luxury on this ship was awe-inspiring. In those times, it cost $7.5 million to build the ship. If you take inflation into account, is equal to $400 million today. The facilities and decorations inside the ship could even leave a 5-star hotel behind. Stained glass mirrors, ornate wood paneling, 2 grand staircases, heated swimming pool, a Turkish bath, an electric bath, a gym, a squash court, 4 restaurants, 2 barber shops, and a library as well. Moreover, the kind of safety features that were used to build the Titanic, this ship was believed to be unsinkable. It was a ship that could never sink. It was that safe. White Star Line was the name of company that built this ship. The vice president of this company was so confident regarding that. He had come out in front of the public and said that this ship is unsinkable. But 2 days later, after setting out on its first voyage, on 12th April 1912, Titanic began to get its first ice warnings. These warnings are not an unusual thing. The ship that sails the oceans often communicate through radio and signal the nearby ships. After getting these warnings, Titanic changed its course twice to avoid danger, but it didn't reduce its speed. Continued its journey toward its destination at the speed of 21.5 knots, which is equal to 40 km per hour. 2 days later, on 14th April 1912, there were 7 more ice warnings, but Captain Smith and his crew ignored these warnings. They didn't slow the speed of Titanic. The notable thing about the night of 14th April was that the moon was never visible. Without the moon, there was no moonlight, and the visibility was low on this night. There was a crow's nest on the ship, a small platform at the height which could be called a lookout point. Someone is made to sit atop it so that they can keep watch on the track of the ship. The person sitting here has to face very low temperatures. The cold winds make the ice tear up, which makes it difficult to see. At 11:39 p.m., a man named Frederick Fleet was atop the crow's nest. Suddenly, he saw before himself a huge iceberg. He rang the bell thrice quickly so that the people below could be alerted and called the officers on the bridge. First officer, William, heard this message and signaled the engine room that the ship should be steered in the left direction, but unfortunately it was too late. Just 1 minute later, at 11:40 p.m., the ship crashed into an iceberg.
Titanic was a new breed of luxury liner.
Titanic left port in Southampton, England.
Among her passengers were many of the wealthy and influential. The band played the gayest tunes and American ragtime dances. The time was 11:40.
The iceberg grazed the right side of the ship.
And all of a sudden she lifted up quickly. Everything that was movable was going through her.
I didn't think it was serious because I didn't think it.
This iceberg was not a small one. It was huge in length, as big as a football field. Scientists estimate that iceberg weighed as much 1.5 million tons. Titanic's front right side collided with the iceberg, specifically near the bow. Now, what is the bow? You can see in this picture that the part right at the front is the bow. For around 10 seconds, the ship grazed against the iceberg, and a huge dent was formed. Due to this, small holes formed in the main body of the ship, since the iceberg was so big and heavy, caused massive damage to Titanic. A few seconds after collisions, the ship's captain, Smith, and architect Thomas Andrews arrived at the site to see how much damage had the ship incurred to the impact. When they saw, they realized that the ship would sink. They were completely shocked upon seeing this. They thought that this ship was unsinkable. At the beginning of the video, I would mention that this ship was considerable unsinkable owing to impressive safety features. There were 2 main safety features which led to this belief. First, this ship had a double bottom hull. The main body of this ship is called hull. The double bottom hull would mean 2 layers. Even if the layer below got damaged, the second layer could save the ship. Second, the hull of the ship was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. Even if 4 out of 16 compartments were filled with water, the ship would still sail. The double bottom hull proved to be of no use. Water was filling in all of them. The unsinkable ship would sink. 20 minutes after collision, at 12 a.m., Captain Smith ordered his crew to send a distress call over radio. The nearby ships would may be detected and come to save them. Senior radio Jack Phillips turned out to be the hero of our story. One after the another, he began sending distress signals. There was no response. He sent another and another. There must be some ships out there that would pick up their distress call. 20 minutes later, at 12:20 a.m., there was a ship called RMS Carpathia that was present near the Titanic. It detected the signal. He spoke to the operator of Titanic over radio and directed this ship to move toward Titanic and go them safe. The rest of the crew members lit up flares and rockets in the sky in the hope that a ship nearby would notice them. But unfortunately, apart from ship Carpathia, there was no response from any other ship. Meanwhile, Captain Smith ordered the evacuation of passengers using the lifeboats on the ship. As per protocol, women and children would be given preference to board the lifeboats. Most of the passengers believed that the Titanic was an unsinkable ship. There is no need for worry. After all, the company that put out ads claimed this again and again. So yes, they might have hit an iceberg, but the ship wouldn't sink. For this reason, the first lifeboat that went down had a capacity of 65 people, but only 28 went. Half the lifeboat remained empty as it was lowered. With the passage of time, compartments began to be filled with water one after the other. The ship began to tilt. By 1 in the night, so much water had filled the compartments in the front that the bow of the ship had gone underwater. Due to this, the rear part of Titanic surfaced out of the water. The propellers at the back surfaced out of the water. People began to fight with one another for the seat in a lifeboat. The problem was there was a scarcity of lifeboat on the ship. There was only 20 lifeboats, which could accommodate only 1200 people approximately, but there were around 2200 aboard the ship. At 2:05 am, the last lifeboat was lowered from Titanic, but 1500 people were still on board. In this chase, some people tried snatching their place in the lifeboats, but some people had accepted their fate and stayed back in the ship, and then slowly began to sink. It didn't take even 3 hours for the unsinkable ship to sink. Now 1500 people aboard the ship either drowned with the ship, or the ones that knew him to swim were killed by hypothermia. The temperature of the water was -2 degrees Celsius. It is said that the captain of Titanic, Edward Smith, stayed at the wheel until the end and drowned with the ship. Some even believe that he committed suicide by killing himself. The ship RMS Carpathia that had set out to save the Titanic reached this location around 3:30 am to save the people on the ship, but it was an hour late. After the disaster of Titanic, questions were raised. Many controversies take birth. Investigations were conducted and some unknown facts surfaced that shocked everyone. How would it feel if I said that there was another ship 37 km away from Titanic that night, which could make it in time to save the passengers of the Titanic? It's true, the ship was SS Californian. 1 hour before the Titanic hit the iceberg, the last iceberg warning was issued by SS Californian. They had warned, watch out, there were a lot of icebergs in the ocean here. After that, 11:15, the radio operator on the Californian ship had switched off the radio. The Californian ship had stopped for the night and was not moving ahead, keeping the danger in mind. Since the ship had stopped for the night and radio was off, it did not receive the distress signal. The ship was so close to the Titanic. This Californian ship didn't come even when the rockets and flares were lit up. It is reported that after 12 am, the crew members of the Californian ship had actually seen the rockets fired from Titanic. They had even informed their captain Stanley Lord, but the captain insisted that it was not distress signals, rather the rich men on Titanic who were partying. Had Captain Lord of the Californian ship taken the rockets and flares seriously that night, so many people aboard the Titanic could have been saved. Next morning, when they switched their radio on, they received the SOS calls from Titanic. They reached the site, but it was too late. They saw only many dead bodies floating in the water. But the inquiries that were conducted in this matter put the blame on Captain Lord of the Californian. The one single man cannot be blamed for such a huge disaster. Other people were responsible as well. Like the lifeboat example I mentioned, there were not a sufficient number of lifeboats because the company that made the ship thought it was unsinkable and the lifeboats were unnecessary. Apart from that, the captain of Titanic had not even conducted safety drills. A safety drill was to be conducted on the day Titanic collided with the iceberg, but the captain cancelled that because he thought that were unnecessary since the ship was unsinkable. The next mistake was that of steersman Robert Hitchens, who was at the steering wheel. That night, when an iceberg alarm was sounded, the officers on the deck instructed that the ship sounded be turned left. But in panic, Robert Hitchens misunderstood the message and steered the ship towards the right. This was the opposite direction toward the iceberg by the time he realized. British inquiry also found that Titanic was issued so many iceberg warnings and to proceed with cautions, but despite that, the ship was sailing at full speed. Why was that? Why did the captain not slow down? There are many theories behind that. A popular theory suggested that Joseph Bruce, The chairman and managing director of White Star Line company that manufactured the Titanic influenced Captain Smith and pressured him that the ship be maintained. There was tremendous pressure from the company that the ship had to complete its first voyage in 6 days. They could show that the Titanic was not only the biggest, the most expensive ship, but the fastest ship as well. A specific incident happened on 14th April at 2 p.m. when Captain Smith saw the ice warnings and showed it to Joseph that they should reduce the speed because there is an ice warning, but Joseph stuffed the paper in his pocket so that the people and the crew member didn't find out. He didn't want the speed of the ship to slow down. This one disaster changed this history worldwide forever. Many new regulations and standards were set out to avoid such disaster in the future. In 1912, the International Ice Patrol was set up so that the oncoming ships could be alerted about the icebergs in their path. For example, a lifeboat regulation was framed, mandating that the ship should have sufficient number of lifeboats for every passenger. When the Titanic sank, it took more than 70 years to find its wreckage under sea. In September 1985, an American ocean explorer, Robert Ball, and a French oceanographer managed to find the Titanic under the sea. Its wreckage was found 3,800 meters under the sea. Two separate pieces of the ship were found 600 meters apart. Today, so many years later, after the ship sank, environment has started to erode the ship lying underwater. It's expected that by 2030, this ship would completely disintegrate underwater. Today, even after 110 years, the fascinating regarding Titanic still remains in the mind of people. In 2012, an Australian billionaire Clive Palmer planned that he would make Titanic 2.